Hello, fellas. We're building a community to share stories with the world. If you have a story worth telling, I'd love to feature on our channel. This will help you share your voice and become part of our growing community. Thank you. Now, let's begin with our story titled, My Female Colleague Tried to Destroy My Career Out of Jealousy, Then I Took My Revenge. The view from the 42nd floor of the Solstice Tower was always a quiet marvel, a sprawling tapestry of city lights that usually filled me with a profound sense of accomplishment. I am Arthur Pendleton, a man who built his entire identity around the quiet virtues of hard work, ethical boundaries, and flawless code. I have always been naturally reserved, preferring the predictable logic of databases to the chaotic variables of office politics. But after 6 years of relentless dedication as a senior systems architect, I had finally been handed the promotion to lead director of infrastructure. I remember standing by the floor-to-ceiling glass, feeling the cool condensation against my forehead, holding a glass of sparkling cider, and thinking that everything I'd sacrificed had finally been worth it. Earth to Arthur, a voice cut through my quiet reverie. I turned to see David leaning against the doorframe of my new corner office, holding 2 paper cups of terrible break-room coffee. David was the senior network administrator and my closest ally in the company. He was a deeply observant, sharply cynical man in his late 30s who possessed an innate ability to see through corporate nonsense with a single, devastating glance, always wearing rumpled flannel shirts that starkly contrasted with our sleek corporate environment. "You're actually drinking the break-room sludge on your first day as director?" I asked, taking the cup with a faint smile. "It keeps me grounded," David replied, taking a sip and grimacing. "Reminds me that no matter how high we climb, we are all still subject to the tyranny of cheap Arabica beans. Besides, I wanted to make sure you hadn't let the title go to your head in the last 48 hours. "Not yet," I laughed, walking over to my new mahogany desk, though I am considering ordering a very large, imposing chair. Something that says, "I understand cloud architecture better than you do." "You do that," David chuckled, before his eyes darted toward the hallway. His posture stiffened slightly. "Speaking of people who think they understand architecture better than you, here comes the welcoming committee." I followed his gaze as Elena walked through the glass doors. Elena Rostova was a senior data analyst on my team. She was incredibly smart, but plagued by a deep-seated insecurity stemming from her non-traditional academic background, an insecurity she aggressively masked with a hyper-competitive, almost ruthless ambition. When she first joined 2 years ago, I had mentored her, but as her skills grew, so did her resentment of my seniority. She felt perpetually overshadowed, convinced that the world was rigged against her, and that my recent promotion was a personal theft of what was rightfully hers. "Arthur, congratulations," Elena said, stepping into the office. Her voice was bright, almost musical, but the smile stretched across her face was tight, and her eyes remained completely cold. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blazer, holding a glossy folder tight against her chest. "Thank you, Elena," I said politely, setting my coffee down. "I'm looking forward to continuing our work together. I know the transition will be a lot, but I'm relying on your analytical models for the upcoming Q3 migration." "Oh, I'm sure we'll work very closely," Elena replied, her tone dipping into something dangerously sweet. "I mean, it's so inspiring to see someone who keeps their head down, who doesn't even network, just fail upwards into a directorship. It gives us all hope." David scoffed loudly, not bothering to hide his disdain. "Arthur didn't fail upwards, Elena. He spent 80 hours a week fixing the messy data pipelines you abandoned last November. He earned it." Elena's eyes flashed with a sudden, venomous anger. Her knuckles turned white around her folder. "I didn't abandon anything, David. I was reallocated by upper management. But I wouldn't expect a wire monkey to understand high-level strategic alignment." "All right, both of you. That's enough." I intervened, feeling a headache beginning to pulse at my temples. "We are on the same team. Elena, did you need something?" "Just dropping off the preliminary risk assessments," she said, tossing the folder onto my desk with a loud smack. "I noticed a few discrepancies in the security protocols you approved last week. Tiny things, but you know how management hates data leaks. It would be a shame if your first week as director was marred by a catastrophic security failure." She turned on her heel and marched out of the office, the sharp click of her heels echoing down the corridor. I stared at the folder, a heavy, sinking feeling forming in my gut. She's going to be a problem, David muttered, crossing his arms. I've been hearing things, Arthur. Whispers in the break room. She's been telling people that the only reason you got this job is because you play golf with Marcus on the weekends. I don't even own golf clubs, I sighed, rubbing my eyes. And Marcus barely knows my last name. Marcus Vance was our vice president of engineering, the man who ultimately signed off on my promotion. He was an overworked, chronically stressed executive in his 50s who cared primarily about optics, quarterly metrics, and avoiding any form of conflict. He was easily swayed by whoever spoke the loudest and presented the neatest graphs, a trait Elena exploited masterfully. The next few weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Elena began a campaign of subtle, plausible deniability. During a high-stakes Tuesday morning meeting, she launched her first major offensive. Marcus, if I may interrupt, Elena said smoothly, pulling up a slide deck on the conference room projector. I was reviewing Arthur's Q3 budget allocation for the server migration, and I found a rather alarming oversight. He entirely omitted the firewall licensing renewals. I felt the heat rise in my neck as 20 faces turned toward me. Elena, that is incorrect. I submitted the licensing renewals under the unified security budget, just as finance requested last month. It's in the second appendix. Oh, is it? She laughed softly, looking around the room as if sharing an inside joke. I must have missed a berry back there. It's just so confusing when things aren't where they're supposed to be. I just went ahead and drafted a corrected budget for you, Arthur. To save you the time. Marcus rubbed his temples, looking annoyed. Arthur, let's not make things overly complicated for finance. Just use Elena's structure. Good catch, Elena. I appreciate your proactive approach. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. She had successfully taken credit for my work while simultaneously framing me as disorganized, and Marcus had eaten it up. This became the new normal. Documents would mysteriously disappear from shared drives right before I needed them. Urgent emails from her would arrive at 11:59 p.m. on a Friday, demanding action that I wouldn't see until Monday morning, making me look unresponsive. But the turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just poured a fresh cup of coffee when an intern bumped into me in the hallway, sending the dark liquid spilling all over my dress shirt. I am so sorry, Mr. Pendleton, the intern gasped, horrified. It's fine, it's an accident, I sighed, pulling my sticky dress shirt away from my chest. I hurried back to my office, took my heavy company ID lanyard from around my neck, and tossed it onto my desk. I left my office door wide open and rushed down the hall to the executive washroom to scrub the stain out. I was gone for exactly 10 minutes. When I returned, everything looked untouched. My lanyard was sitting exactly where I left it. I put it back around my neck, finished out the day in a damp shirt, and thought nothing of it. I stayed late that evening, taking a WebEx call with our offshore development team from 7 until 8 before finally heading home. It was the very next afternoon when my desk phone rang. Caller ID showed Human Resources. Arthur, this is Sarah, the voice on the other end said. Sarah Jenkins was the head of HR, a woman who operated entirely by the corporate playbook. She was neutral, intensely procedural, and utterly terrified of bad PR. 2 years ago, the company had narrowly avoided a massive lawsuit over a genuine harassment case by settling out of court for a staggering sum. Since then, Sarah viewed every employee interaction as a potential legal bomb. We need you to come down to the 3rd floor. Room B immediately. Of course, Sarah. What is this regarding? I asked, pulling on my calendar. I cannot discuss it over the phone. Please come down now. Do not speak to anyone on your way down. A cold dread pooled in my stomach. I walked down the hallways, the fluorescent lights suddenly feeling harsh and interrogative. When I entered Room B, Sarah was sitting across from a vacant chair. Next to her sat Marcus, who couldn't even look me in the eye. He was staring at his hands, his face pale and slick with sweat. Sit down, Arthur, Sarah said, gesturing to the chair. She slid a thick manila envelope across the table. I'm going to inform you of the allegations that have been brought against you. As of this moment, you are under administrative suspension pending a full internal investigation. Suspension. I choked out, the word feeling like glass in my throat. What allegations? What are you talking about? Sarah opened her notebook, her face completely impassive. Yesterday afternoon, A formal complaint was filed by Elena Rostova. She alleges that on Tuesday evening, at approximately 7:30 p.m., you followed her into the basement server room. She alleges that you locked the door, cornered her against the server racks, made explicit physical advances, and threatened to fire her if she did not comply with your demands. The room started to spin. The air was sucked out of my lungs. I looked at Sarah, then at Marcus. That is a lie, I stammer, my voice breaking. That is an absolute, complete fabrication. I wasn't even in the basement on Tuesday. I haven't been in the basement in a month. Arthur, Marcus finally spoke, his voice trembling. She came to us in tears. She was shaking. She described the threats in detail. She said you told her you could ruin her career with a single email. Because she is manipulating you. I shouted, slamming my hand on the table, which only made Sarah physically recoil and scribble something furiously into her notebook. Listen to me. She has been trying to sabotage me for weeks because she wanted my promotion. You know this, Marcus. Do not raise your voice in this room, Arthur, Sarah said coldly. We take these allegations incredibly seriously. We are committed to maintaining a safe workspace. After the Miller incident 2 years ago, we do not take chances. Given the severity of the claims and the power dynamic between a director and an analyst, we have no choice but to suspend your access. You are to hand over your ID badge, your company phone, and your laptop immediately. You're assuming I'm guilty, I whispered, the crushing weight of the situation finally falling on me. You're taking her word without a shred of proof, and you're destroying my life. We are following procedure, Sarah replied, holding out her hand for my badge. We just want to protect this safe space, Arthur. If you are innocent, the investigation will bear that out. But for now, security will escort you out of the building. The walk of shame through the lobby was the longest walk of my life. I felt the eyes of my colleagues on me as 2 burly security guards flanked me to the glass doors. Whispers followed me like a physical wake. I was shoved out into the pouring rain, standing on the sidewalk with nothing but my coat and my wallet. I felt completely, utterly hollowed out. When I finally arrived home, the house was eerily quiet. My wife, Clara, was sitting at the kitchen island, staring blankly at her phone. Clara was a pediatric nurse, fiercely protective, deeply supportive, and currently 7 months pregnant with our first child. She was naturally anxious, and the financial strain of preparing for the baby had already been weighing heavily on her. When she looked up and saw me standing in the doorway, soaked and pale at 3 in the afternoon, she didn't rush to me. She just turned her phone around to face me. Clara, I started, but the words died in my throat when I read the screen. It was an anonymous text message. Ask your husband why security just dragged him out of the building. Ask him what he did to the young girl on his team in the basement last night. Who sent you this? I breathed, my heart hammering painfully against my ribs. I don't know, Clara said, her voice shaking, tears welling in her eyes. It came from a blocked number 20 minutes ago. Arthur, what is going on? Why are you home? Please tell me this is a sick joke. It's Elena, I sobbed, the tears finally breaking through my composure as I fell to my knees in front of her. She told HR that I cornered her in the server room, that I assaulted her and threatened her job. And then she texted you. She's trying to destroy my entire life, Clara. What? Clara screamed, jumping back up, clutching her pregnant belly. That's insane. You couldn't. Why would she do this? She wants my job, I cried, reaching out for my wife's hand. Clara, you have to believe me. I swear on my life, I never touched her. I barely even speak to her unless there are other people in the room. Clara looked at me, her eyes wide with terror. I could see the rapid calculations happening in her mind. The loss of income, the legal fees, the absolute destruction of my reputation in the industry. I believe you, Arthur, she whispered, falling to her knees and wrapping her arms around me. I know who you are, but what are we going to do? We lose our health insurance in 30 days if you're fired. We can't afford a baby without it. I don't know, I admitted, holding her tight. I don't know. The next few days were a blur of agonizing silence. I was legally barred from contacting anyone at the company. I paced the floor of our living room, replaying every interaction I had ever had with Elena. I needed advice. I needed someone with leverage. I picked up my personal phone and dialed Robert, the former VP of engineering who had mentored me for years before retiring. He knew me. He knew my character. Arthur, my boy, Robert's booming voice answered. Good to hear from you. I saw the announcement about the directorship. Proud of you. Robert, I need your help. I say, my voice desperate. I've been suspended. False allegations. A girl on my team, Elena, is claiming I sexually harassed her. It's a complete lie, Robert. I need you to call Marcus. You know him. You know me. Tell him I wouldn't do this. There was a long, suffocating silence on the line. When Robert finally spoke, his voice had lost all its warmth. Arthur, I can't do that. What? Robert, please, they're going to fire me. They might press charges. Listen to me carefully, Arthur, Robert said, his tone flat and corporate. In this climate, perception is reality. You heard what happened with Miller 2 years ago. If HR is involved, it's radioactive. If I call Marcus an advocate for you, and they find even a shred of evidence, or even if they just decide to settle to keep her quiet, my reputation goes down with yours. You're a liability right now. I'm sorry, but you need to handle this through your lawyer. Do not call me again. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, feeling a new layer of isolation wrap around me. The mentor who had taught me everything about integrity and leadership had abandoned me at the first sign of trouble. The corporate machine didn't care about truth. It only cared about distance from the blast radius. That evening, Clara experienced severe cramping. The stress was physically affecting her. I rushed her to the emergency room, my heart pounding against my ribs. We spent 6 agonizing hours in triage, waiting to hear if the baby was safe. The doctor finally told us it was stress-induced Braxton Hicks, but ordered Clara on strict bed rest. I sat by her hospital bed, watching her sleep, a cold, hardened resolve crystallizing in my chest. I wasn't just fighting for my job anymore. I was fighting for my family's survival. Elena was trying to take the food from my unborn child's mouth. The next morning, my personal phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It read, "Meet me at the diner on 4th Street. 2 p.m. Come alone. D." I felt a tiny spark of hope. David. He hadn't abandoned me. I arrived at the diner early, sitting in a booth in the back. David slid into the seat across from me, looking exhausted. He glanced around nervously before pulling a manila folder from his jacket. "You look like hell, Arthur," he said quietly. "I feel like it," I replied. "David, you know I didn't do this. You have to know that." "I know you didn't," David sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Elena is a shark, but this is a whole new level of psychotic. But here's the problem, man. HR is entirely on her side. Sarah is treating her like glass." Elena gave a tearful testimony, complete with a timeline. Tuesday, 7:30 p.m., down in the basement server room. She claims you cornered her there when she was doing a manual backup check. "But I wasn't there," I hissed, leaning over the table. "I was in my office. Check my badge swipes." "I tried," David said grimly. HR pulled the badge logs for the building. Your badge swiped into the basement stairwell at 7:25 p.m. Her swiped in at 7:28 p.m. I froze. That's impossible. I never went to the basement. David looked at me intensely. "Think, Arthur. Did you lose your badge? Did you leave it somewhere?" "No. I had on a lanyard around my..." I stopped. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Tuesday afternoon. The coffee spill. I spilled coffee on my shirt around 4 p.m. I went to the executive washroom to clean up. I took my lanyard off and left it on my desk. I was gone for 10 minutes. "And your office was unlocked," David finished, his eyes widening. "She took your badge, went down to the basement, swiped it, waited 3 minutes, swiped her own badge, and then came back up and slipped it onto your desk before you returned. She manufactured the digital footprint," I whispered, horrified by the sheer calculation of it. "And HR has the logs. It looks like I was down there waiting for her." "Exactly," David said. "And the basement cameras have been down for maintenance since Monday. She knew there would be no video evidence, just the badge logs. So I'm dead," I said, leaning back against the vinyl booth. "It's her word and the badge logs against my word. HR will fire me by Friday." David smiled, a slow, predatory grin. "Not necessarily. I'm a network admin, Arthur. I don't just look at the shiny front-end systems that HR uses. I look at the ugly back end." He opened a folder and slid a printout across the table. It was a dense page of code and server pings. "What is this?" I asked, scanning the lines. "That is the local server log for the RFID scanner on the basement door," David explained, tapping the paper. "The main HR system registers when a badge is scanned, but it doesn't register how it's scanned." I pulled the raw data from the local hardware. I don't understand, I said, frustrated. Look at the timestamp for your badge swipe at 7:25 p.m. Look at the data packet size. David pointed a grease-stained finger at the numbers. It's a micro ping. Now look at Elena's swipe at 7:28 p.m. It's a full data packet. Do you know what that means? I stared at the numbers, my engineering brain finally clicking into gear. A micro ping that happens when a badge is scanned, but the heavy magnetic lock doesn't actually disengage. The door didn't open. Bingo, David beamed. If a person physically walks up to the door and holds their badge to the reader stays engaged long enough to trigger the relay and unlock the door. That's a full packet. But if someone takes two badges and just quickly slaps them against the reader one after the other without opening the door, the system registers the first one as a micro ping, a failed open state, and the second one as a successful open. She swiped my badge, but didn't open the door. I breathed, the realization dawning on me. Then she immediately swiped her own badge and went in. She had both badges in her hand at the exact same time. Proving that you were not down there, David said. She falsified the digital record. But she didn't stop there, Arthur. She came to my desk yesterday, smiled at me, told me she heard I was looking into the logs, and casually mentioned that it would be a shame if HR found out I was accessing confidential investigation files without authorization. She threatened to have me fired just for looking. David, you could lose your job for pulling this, I said, looking at him with deep gratitude. If she wins, I don't want to work there anyway, David shrugged. But wait, there's more. While you were supposedly harassing her at 7:30 p.m., where were you? I was in my office, working on the migration strategy. Were you talking to anyone? Yes, I nearly shouted, drawing looks from the diner waitress. I had a WebEx call with the offshore development team in Bangalore. From 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., we were screen sharing, and my microphone was hot the entire time. David leaned back, looking extremely satisfied. WebEx records server-side audio metadata for quality assurance. Even if you didn't hit record on the meeting, Cisco has a log showing continuous audio transmission from your IP address, your desktop computer, at the exact minute Elena claims you were in the basement. I wanted to leap across the table and hug him. We had it. We had the proof. But as I gathered the papers, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was an unknown number. I answered it. Hello. Arthur. It's Elena. Her voice was soft, devoid of the musical brightness she usually faked. It sounded hollow and urgent. My blood instantly boiled. I signaled David to be quiet and put it on speakerphone, holding it close to both of us. How did you get this number? You aren't supposed to contact me. I have my ways, she said smoothly. Listen, Arthur, I know you have your formal hearing tomorrow morning. I know Sarah is pushing for termination with cause. That means no severance and a black mark on your record that will ensure you never work in this industry again. What do you want, Elena? I snarled. Haven't you done enough? You texted my wife. She's in the hospital because of the stress you caused. Oh, please, let's not be melodramatic, she scoffed, dismissing my pain with sickening ease. I'm just living my truth, Arthur. I have to protect my safe space. You stole that promotion from me. You were just a corporate drone who got lucky. I am 10 times the architect you are, but I don't want to see you completely ruined. I'm not a monster. You're accusing me of a felony. I yelled, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles cracked. I'm offering you a way out, she continued, her voice turning into a cold whisper. Resign. Tonight. Send an email to Sarah and Marcus. Tell them you are resigning for personal reasons, and you will sign a non-disclosure agreement. If you do that, I will tell HR that I am choosing to prioritize my mental health and I don't want to pursue the investigation further. I'll say I'm too traumatized to proceed. You get to walk away quietly, and I get the director position by Friday. It's a win-win. A win-win, I repeated, my voice shaking with absolute rage. You manufacture a lie that destroys my life. You gaslight the entire company, and you call it a win-win? You're trying to extort me. I'm giving you a choice, Arthur, she said, sounding genuinely irritated, as if I were being unreasonable. If you fight this tomorrow, I will cry in that room. I will describe in graphic detail the power dynamic you exploited. And who do you think Sarah will believe? The crying young woman or the defensive older male boss? This is the corporate world, Arthur. You're guilty the moment I open my mouth. Resign, or I end you. The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone, my chest heaving. The sheer entitlement, the weaponization of a system meant to protect actual victims, just to advance her career. It was nauseating. I looked up at David. He was staring at the phone, looking utterly disgusted. "Did you record that?" David asked quietly. "I have a call recording app running by default for client meetings," I said, a grim, humorless smile spreading across my face. "Got every word." "Tomorrow," David said, standing up and tossing a $20 bill on the table. "We burn her to the ground." The next morning, I arrived at the Solstice Tower for my formal HR hearing. I wasn't allowed past the lobby without an escort. Sarah herself came down to get me, flanked by security. She looked at me with undisguised contempt. "Arthur, room B. Let's get this over with," she said curtly. I followed her up to the third floor. When we entered room B, Marcus was there, looking even more stressed than before. And sitting at the far end of the table, clutching a tissue and looking perfectly, tragically fragile, was Elena. "What is she doing here?" I asked sharply, refusing to sit down. I thought this was a disciplinary hearing with HR. "Elena requested to be present," Sarah said, taking her seat. "She wants to read a victim impact statement before we deliver our final decision." "A victim impact statement," I repeated, my voice thick with sarcasm. I looked at Elena. She gave me a tiny, imperceptible smirk behind her tissue. "Arthur, please," Marcus pleaded. "Just sit down. We've reviewed the evidence. The badge logs place you both in the basement at the time of the incident. Given the zero-tolerance policy of this company, we are proceeding with termination with cause." "Before you do that," I said, finally sitting down and placing my manila folder on the table, "I have a right to present exculpatory evidence under Section 4 of the Employee Handbook. Or does HR only follow the rules when it's convenient?" Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You can present whatever you like, Arthur, but the badge logs are immutable. We know you were there." I opened the folder. I was not in the basement. I was in my office on a WebEx call with our offshore team. From 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Elena dabbed her eyes. "He's lying, Sarah. He probably just left the meeting running while he came down to the basement to assert his dominance over me." She let out a small, staged sob. "A clever theory," I said, sliding the first piece of paper towards Sarah. "Except Cisco's backend log show continuous audio input from my desktop microphone for the entire hour. If I'd left the room, the noise gate would have closed. The offshore team can also testify that I was actively debugging code with them at 7:30 p.m. Sarah frowned, looking at the paper. This is highly technical. It doesn't disprove the badge logs." "No, this disproves the badge logs," I said, sliding the RFID local server printout across the table. "This is the raw data from the basement scanner. It shows that my badge was scanned at 7:25 p.m., but the door never opened. It registered a failed state. 3 minutes later, Elena's badge was scanned, and the door opened. She had my badge. She stole it from my desk, swiped it, waited, swiped hers, and walked in alone." Elena dropped the tissue. Her fragile demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer panic. That's a fabrication. He hacked the system. He's a director. He has access to do that." Actually, the door to room B opened, and David stepped in, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "Directors don't have access to the physical security layer. I do. And I pulled those logs directly from the hardware this morning, with the Chief Information Security Officer standing right next to me to verify the chain of custody." Sarah looked from the papers to David, and then, slowly, toward Elena. "Elena, did you take his badge?" "No, they are teaming up against me." Elena shrieked, her voice turning shrill. "This is exactly what I was talking about. The boys' club protecting their own. You're going to let my truth be silenced by a bunch of technical jargon." It was exactly what she had threatened on the phone. The weaponization of the social climate. I felt my blood boil, but I kept my voice deadpan and icy. Speaking of silencing people, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and set it on the table. I received a phone call yesterday at 2:15 p.m. from an unknown number. Fortunately, my device auto-records for client compliance. I pressed play. Elena's cold, arrogant voice filled the small conference room. "Resign. Tonight. If you do that, I will tell HR that I am choosing to prioritize my mental health, and I don't want to pursue the investigation further. You get to walk away quietly, and I get the director position by Friday. It's a win-win." The silence in the room after the recording ended was absolute. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Marcus was staring at Elena with his mouth literally hanging open. Sarah's face had turned a mottled shade of red, a dangerous mixture of embarrassment and fury. "You threatened him," Sarah whispered, her corporate neutrality entirely shattered. "You fabricated a sexual harassment claim to steal a promotion. You used the Miller incident to manipulate this department. Do you have any idea the legal jeopardy you just placed this company in?" Elena was trembling now, but not from stage trauma. It was pure, unadulterated terror. The mask had slipped, and underneath was just a desperate, insecure woman who had played a dangerous game and lost catastrophically. "Sarah, please, I didn't mean—" "Not a word," Sarah snapped, her voice like a whip. "David, please escort Miss Rostova to her desk. She is to pack her personal belongings immediately. She is terminated effectively right now. And Elena, if I ever hear you speak of this company again, our legal team will bury you in civil suits for extortion and defamation until you're bankrupt." Elena stood up, her face pale, tears streaming down her face, real ones this time. She looked at me, a mixture of hatred and pleading in her eyes, but I offered her nothing. No sympathy, no anger, just the cold realization that she had destroyed her own life. She turned and walked out, followed closely by David. I sat in a room with Sarah and Marcus for another hour. The apologies were profuse, desperate, and entirely pathetic. Marcus promised me a bonus, guaranteed my job security, and practically begged me not to sue the company. Sarah assured me that my record would be completely expunged of the incident. But as I walked out of the Solstice Tower that afternoon, breathing in the cold city air, I felt changed. The naive belief I had held, that hard work and ethical behavior were armor against the darkness of the corporate world, was gone. I had survived, I had cleared my name, and I would be able to provide for Clara and my baby. But the view from the 42nd floor would never look the same to me again. I knew now what lurked in the shadows of ambition, and I knew exactly what it took to survive it.